Hi, everyone. How you doing? So I want to do a quick little survey before we get going. I'd like you to raise your hand if you play or have played a musical instrument. Wow, almost, that's 90%. Okay, put them down. Now raise your hand again if you've written a song. Okay, so about maybe 10%, 15%. All right, I'll use that later. Just wanted to get that information out there. So today I want to talk to you about music, bands, and business, and a little bit of my story. I fell in love with music when I was 7 years old. I discovered my parents' record collection, and fortunately it had the Beatles in it. And I came across Anya Burke Sing, and it just opened my ears to what music really was, the way the guitars sounded like birds singing, and the voices harmonized into one voice, and the drums, and I didn't understand how that music was being made, but I knew that at some point I was going to figure that out and make that kind of music. When I grew older, I started writing songs, playing guitar, putting together bands. They were all terrible, songs and bands. And by the time I got to college, the bands weren't half bad. This is one of my bands from college called the Staple Guns. I'm like, yeah, creative names. I was the guy on the left there, not with the curly hair, but the other side. I realized that you can be as awesome as you think you are in your basement, but it's quite another thing to get on stage. Getting to stage is the hard part. You got to get people that want to see you play. You got to get them to show up. You got to get promoters to pay attention to you. So I really began to investigate the fine art of promoting, which is one of my, here's a little handiwork here, a flyer we did for a show. And so we spent a lot of nights at Kinko's, this is back in the 90s, and back then promoting meant putting as many flyers up on different, billboards and poles around town. And I got good enough at it that eventually a rock club in Bloomington called Second Story had me running the door. I was the janitor, and I was the booking agent. So I would come in, get the show ready to go. I would work the door, and then I'd clean the toilets. And it was quite a job. And in between, I went to class. And at some point, I graduated. And I joke I spent as much time at shows as I did in class, but it's not really a joke. It's true, I did. So I was an English major. I wandered around the Midwest, and eventually I found my way back to Indianapolis. I'm from South Bend originally. And I started businesses. I realized that although I wasn't that good I'm as good at music, but I wasn't that good enough to make a living at. It's almost impossible to do anyway. I was pretty good at businesses. And I started hiring musicians. And as I started with more businesses and I hired more musicians, I realized that there was a set of characteristics that musicians brought to a business that were really beneficial to the business. They were quick learners, they were problem solvers, they were creative, they're collaborative when they showed up. Yeah. That's a problem. So I noticed over time, this is a great picture from the 80s, Indiana band called the Hammerheads from Musical Family Tree. You can go to that site and check out some other photos. I realized that bands were really startups and that musicians were really entrepreneurs, and that when you're in a band, you have to learn a lot about business. You have to learn about branding, how to name yourself, marketing, how to take yourself to market, right? And so in the end, they may look very different, but a band, it looks a lot like a business, like a startup. So what is a band's product? A band's product is a song, it's music, right? And so a band has to learn how to write these songs, bring these songs to market. And bands align very clearly around that purpose, which I think is a powerful thing. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this later with businesses too, but bands know why they exist. There's a great Steve Jobs quote. He said, "My business model is the Beatles, a group of individuals that put aside their differences to come together to do something great." I'm paraphrasing, but that's what he said, basically. And that's what bands do. They say, we serve the music. And they take it to market. They go out and they get people to buy those CDs or download those tracks. Go play shows, play those songs for people. That's why you see so many musicians, I think, in marketing and advertising, is that it's natural to them. They just do that. They can't stop themselves. But musicians are also hackers. They're very comfortable with a soldering iron, right? They know how to dig into gear and fix it. And so, just like the other kind of hackers, they're comfortable making something out of nothing. They're very creative in that way. And a song, if you think about it, is something out of nothing. It did not exist before. And when it does exist, it only exists as a vibration. Neil Young said, music is a picture of sound. It's basically, a recording is a picture of sound, right? It passes through air, and you may capture it in different ways, but in a sense, it doesn't exist in the same way other things exist. The same thing as the internet. The internet is essentially something out of nothing. You also see a lot of musicians in technology. So here we have design, marketing, technology. Musicians thrive in these environments. These are all the growing industries out there. So let me talk a little about what I know about business. I've started a number of businesses, and I've worked with hundreds of organizations with the companies that I have. And I see that most organizations struggle with these two things: teamwork and creativity. They need people to work together in effective teams to solve problems creatively. But they can't get people to do it. They struggle with that. It's very hard. They can't get people inspired to work in that way. Here's another thing I've known about companies. If you ask them why they're in business, most of them will say, to make money, right? But Daniel Pink said recently in his book, Drive, that money can actually be a demotivator for employees at a certain point. So they struggle to create meaning. Bands, however, they exist because music is a powerful purpose. And you've seen this with bands. Bands will travel across the country. They'll do whatever it takes to make that music that they love so much. So when you think about this, you've got businesses needing teamwork and creativity, and you've got bands who have it. You have businesses that are struggling with purpose. You have bands that have it. And you have businesses beginning to recognize, hey, we can't align ourselves just around profit. It doesn't work. I love this quote from John Mackey. The best way to maximize profits over the long term is to not make them the primary goal of the business. As a business owner, I completely agree with this. You've got to give people something to believe in. So I see this as supply and demand. You've got all these talented, creative people out here doing in bands, right? Making music. And you've got these businesses that really need teamwork and creativity. And we keep hearing like the right people aren't out there. Maybe we need to rethink what the resume looks like. Maybe people ought to put the bands they've been in just as much as the businesses they've worked for. Because when I talk to a potential hire, I want to know that, because how they put that band together, how they took it on tour. I'll be honest, when people ask me, where do you find your talent? I say the music scene. Because a lot of those people are the hardest working, most creative people you'll ever find. So I'll leave you with some what ifs. What if businesses had employees that were as passionate about their work as musicians are about their music? Businesses that inspire their employees with the purpose, the music of their business, right? The why of their business. And they attracted their employees to that purpose. What if we taught our children not just how to play music, but to write music? That would lead them down all kinds of strange and wonderful paths, forming their own bands, having all kinds of important experiences. So I want to encourage all of you that raised your hand that said you play music. Don't just play music. Write music. It will take you strange, wonderful places that will teach you many things about life that could benefit you at your job, at home, and in your community. Thank you.